Hey, all right. Well, welcome to Employee Retention Strategies. My name is Lawrence Heiner. I'll be your host today for this training session. I am the Director of Training and Technical Assistance at CalCAPA, which is the California Community Action Partnership Association. And today I'm coming to you with my credentials as a Gallup certified strength coach to talk through some of the ways that our organizations can retain staff and some of the reasons why that's the case, some of the data behind that. A lot of this comes from Gallup and some of it from our own network. So let's go ahead and get started. So our objectives today are threefold. First, I want to talk through some of the current trends that Gallup has tracked in terms of employee retention and what that means to our organizations. Um, Secondly, we'll explore some of the evidence-based retention strategies to keep those employees from leaving. And then lastly is to some ways that we may implement practical solutions to improve our own retention. I'll welcome questions throughout the training today. And if you'd like to pose those in the chat, that's great. If you'd like to come off of mute and announce your question, that's cool too. I'll keep an eye out for raised hands. Okay. So first thing is to take a look at kind of the state of affairs today. And in the United States in general, we could look at global statistics too, but in the United States in general, organizations, businesses, companies across the country annually have somewhere in the ballpark of 20 to 25% turnover, okay, in their staff. A lot of that is normal kind of turnover as people find different positions and that sort of thing. But a good deal of it is people that are not satisfied with their current engagement level or lack of growth opportunities at the organizations that they're working with. In California, that percentage is a little higher due to the cost of living here and the nature of our competitive markets. And then for nonprofits in California specifically, we're looking at somewhere around 30 to 35% annual turnover. And we look at national or into safety net programs, they'll exceed 40%. For those that are not in California, you would expect that your percentages would be pretty similar in all of these areas, particularly in the nonprofit space, where we're impacted by a number of factors that don't impact the for-profit space, not the least of which is competitive pay for the work that we do. All right. So how do we keep these folks around? There are many ways to attract and retain talent in our organizations. Love to hear about some of the things that you all are doing. But here are a few that have some evidence behind them. So the first one, in terms of retaining staff, is that highly engaged employees reduce turnover by 59%. And what do we mean by highly engaged employees? So if you think about employee engagement as a metric, a measurable metric, and it is very possible to go out and measure that. There are a number of tools that you can use and some that we'll recommend. But when you look at employees that are highly engaged in their work, they're way less likely to leave for another opportunity. Another couple of subsets of this, besides highly engaged, would be just your regularly engaged staff, and then you've got disengaged, even highly disengaged. So when we break out the employee engagement categories, when we look at how well we're engaging our staff, um, the higher levels of engagement that we can offer, the more likely it is folks will stick around. And that makes a lot of sense when you start to think about what engagement means. Engagement really references our ability to leverage what it is that we do well on a regular basis at work, right? So if things that you are naturally talented at doing, you're doing on a regular basis at work, then chances are you're more engaged. That doesn't mean that your work is less rigorous or easy. It means that you're matched well, you're well suited for the work that you're doing. You kind of enjoy the tasks that are ahead of you. Okay. So that's engagement. Second area for retention is career growth opportunities, especially for millennials. When Gallup pulled this, 87% of millennials reference this as a very high indicator as to whether or not they're going to stay with their current employer is growth opportunities. So growth opportunities can also mean a variety of things. When we're in the nonprofit space, we don't always have a lot of roles that you can work into. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. So when we're looking at growth opportunities, that means that you've got some level of advancement, right? So those are like stretch assignments, or as opportunities come around in the business, that there are chances as staff that we can engage in things that we are interested in doing um, wherever the business is growing. Okay. So it's very important to look at growth opportunities. And if they don't exist naturally, then it's possible for the organization to sort of invent them as the needs of the business move along. Right? Third area is in recognition. So recognition increases retention fourfold. All right. And recognition also takes a lot of forms. We're going to look into that here in a little bit. But by recognizing staff, they understand that they're important to the organization and more clearly see their place long term. And then last proven strategy is in flexible work arrangements. In the past several years, we've seen new additions to what's included in that idea of flexible work arrangements with the onset of hybrid work environments. So sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not. But hybrid is only one kind of work arrangement. So by looking at flexible scheduling, at the needs of the business, and then also the needs of the person, we can be creative about how flexible work arrangements attract talent. As we came up through the pandemic, many people cited the flexibility of being able to manage their household differently, having remote options to attend meetings and so forth. So by following that idea, that kind of spirit of innovation when looking at work arrangements, sometimes you can be very creative, even outside of having to use remote work as an option. So those are some of the areas. We'll dig into them a little bit more here. The first one was employee engagement. So if we unpack that a bit more, there's a few areas that you can look at to engage employees more meaningfully. So first is to provide meaningful work. Now, as a nonprofit, a lot of times we're attracting folks that are already engaged in that mission kind of oriented work, right? So as we are aligning the roles that we have available with the staff that's there, that we're aligning those appropriately, okay? And that people find meaning in their work. A second area is just checking in. So when managers check in with staff, Gallup recommends weekly conversations and kind of a more formalized format so that you're moving projects along and that sort of thing. But checking in regularly is really important communication mechanism so that as staff, we know that we're on the right track. And then as managers, we know that assignments are being met to the standards that we're setting. Okay. And then a third area of engagement is recognizing achievements and doing that frequently. So whenever you notice good work, to acknowledge that promotes the good work, right? And here we'll note that public or private praise is appropriate in different settings, right? And certain different people sometimes prefer to not be praised publicly. Maybe they get embarrassed, or there could be opportunities to showcase good work. So you want to do that intentionally. So just recognize or remember, I suppose, that recognizing achievements frequently is a great way to retain people as well as promote the good work that you're doing. I'll pause here. Um, are there any other ways that um, we're enhancing engagement right now in our agencies that you'd like to share?
Lawrence, I'd like to just add real quick, I think team huddles or team meetings, on a similar note to a couple of these points, can be pretty helpful.
Real good. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I guess, yeah, just recognizing that there are formal and informal teams too. So along with that, sometimes, as a manager of a recognized team, that's one thing, but being a team lead or something like that and a committee, that's another opportunity to do that engagement. Cool. Thank you. All right. Second area there was fostering career development. So a few ways to do that. One of them is providing leadership training. So especially as you're looking at folks who are taking their first steps out of line level work and into management, or if they're fresh into supervising other people in the business, providing leadership training is a great way of showing what the uh, what the organization finds is valuable in its leadership, and then it also acts as a retention mechanism. One example that I'd love to share with you is entry level management, which is a course that was written by um, a Roma trainer and master trainer here in California. And this program, while it's not Roma, it does go through a lot of basic competencies that brand new managers need to develop as they get into management roles, right? So you can learn more about that at elmtrainers.com. But there are lots of ways to engage in leadership development. That's one example. Um, and that's for entry level. As you move up into your leadership ranks, the training opportunities start to increase as well, and up to some of these later options here, right? Including the next one, which is tuition reimbursement. So if having well-educated staff is important to the organization, then you may consider factoring in some sort of tuition reimbursement for the roles that you're looking to advance, right? That could be in like a finance kind of a area, general business, communications. It's kind of up to you and your business and where you see the most engagement, like what you would want to propose as tuition reimbursement. But that is a way of retaining staff. Third area in career development is setting up internal mentorship programs. Lots of agencies already have this in place, sometimes formally, sometimes informally. But anytime that you can get your more tenured staff together with your newer staff, there's an opportunity for learning there, teaching the ropes, that sort of thing. So um, uh, many agencies have on-the-job training, and that is another way of demonstrating mentorship, kind of apprenticeship on the job at an agency. Okay. So recognition programs, these are some of the ideas that we've got for you on formalizing recognition programs. So one thing is to celebrate milestones. Those are kind of straightforward and mostly required tracking, right? So looking at employee anniversaries or achievements. Um, some organizations recognize birthdays and things, but these are great ways of keeping the recognitions related to your business. Um, Another thing is to build formal recognition systems. So you may have like a monthly award setup or other ways of leveraging unrestricted funds to, I don't know, provide awards or otherwise recognize people for work that they're doing, right? We've come into some challenges in nonprofit space with issuing out things like bonuses because of the nature of our financial structure. So it's really important for us to be creative with the ways that we are able to financially incentivize staff. It's possible to do, but you just want to be careful as we do that. And then in terms of resources, SHRM is one of your better bets, right? For checking out guidelines for recognition programs. That's the Society for Human Resources Managers um, at SHRM.org. And you'll find a ton of resources there, not just for recognition programs, but that is one good place to go for additional ideas. So are there any recognition programs that you have going on in your organization right now that aren't really listed here or maybe reflect some of this stuff?
For CAP, we do birthday recognitions.
All right.
Nothing big, just a cake or whatever their favorite dessert is, and we usually all sing happy birthday for them.
Gotcha. It sounds very like culturally relevant to the organization that you've got going on there, right? Like that's the vibe that you have.
Yes, exactly. So we try to, maintain that as best as possible. So, yeah, we just like to do a little something for them.
Very cool. Very cool. Great. So the another area in promoting work-life balance when we're attracting folks to stay, and this kind of falls under that flexible work idea. One thing is to consider flexible schedules, right? So just looking at the needs of the business first, like when do you need to have that particular skill set available and online, right? Is it a regular 8 to 5? Are there other set hours that you need folks to be available? What are their tasks like that require them to have particular times set out? And if that's not necessary, what can you also kind of offload and provide more flexible times to do those tasks as an option? And that it also takes a lot of um, sort of project management skill in order to ensure that those tasks are being done without micromanagement. Okay. Um, Another option to promote work-life balance is to offer mental health days. And this would be something to factor into your employee handbook and treat similar to sick time. Um, but you may explore having those sorts of mental health days so that people can take the time that they need to reset and refresh. Um, so consider that working within your time off policies for your employees. Um, recognizing mental health. And then a third area is to promote or even pay for tools like Calm or Headspace or other applications that promote mindfulness or mindfulness meditation. I want to be careful on this one. This is not so that we can amp up the stress at work because now we've got a tool to release the stress at home. That's not the message. Okay. What is the message though is that our regular levels of stress at work are real. They impact all of us, but the tools that can be available to us help us to mitigate that and provide us with some kind of on the spot stress reduction tools that we can use. Okay. Incidentally, slow, deep breathing is one of the most popular ways of reducing stress. Highly recommend it. Simple count to 5 with deep breaths is good, but providing tools is important. Okay. And then engaging in community building. And this is one of the last areas that we'll explore here. Um, especially in our mission-driven organizations, when we have an opportunity to come together and do some of the work together, that really helps to solidify our purpose with the organization. So, when possible, when we can do team building activities, especially off-site team building activities, are really helpful to get us in a different environment, but still together as a team and to demonstrate the organization's commitment to some purpose when doing those activities. You may also have cross-department collaboration, particularly if you're taking intentional days to do some interdepartmental work, right? This can be taxing on the other department, right? To have guests come around. So this is a bit of work. This is intentional on the organization's behalf to provide these kinds of interdepartmental opportunities. One thing that you can also do is have a common kind of a situation where different departments are competing in different ways. For instance, if you had like a coat drive or a food drive challenge or something like that going on in the office, and then kind of having friendly challenges across departments for stuff like that. Other things can be considering when good volunteer times are to come together and support your local community with volunteering or with special projects. And that is absolutely reflective of the community that you're in. And because we're community action agencies, we're relatively in tune with a lot of what's going on. And if we're not, this is a great way of getting in tune with what those volunteer activities may be. I would think that we're a little more removed at some of our public agencies, for instance, on some of the projects that are going on, and we may want to be more engaged. But that's for everybody, right? So for us at the association level, we're in the office most of the time, so we don't always get out and have an opportunity to participate in local volunteer days or projects. So when we do have the opportunity, it's really, really valuable. Okay. So what are some of the other ways that you build engagement with your staff today, or what are some of the ideas that you might have that you would want to try?
Yeah, Lawrence, I just wanted to add from the last slide, talked about different mindfulness apps like Calm and things of that nature, and I think even mental health days. I am aware of some employers that have actually brought in like yoga practitioners for the staff, or meditation practitioners, things of that nature. And for the most part, I've heard that a few different times among different employers, and for the most part, I've heard nothing but really good reports, that was very well received from the staff. So that's another application potentially.
Oh yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's tough to justify the expenses for those things until you circle it back around with being able to measure employee engagement. So when you have those tools available to you, you can start to see whether or not your efforts are having an impact. Otherwise, it can be very ambiguous. We don't want to wait until the retention number comes around, right? That feels like a little bit too late. If you're you're counting like the folks that are leaving, that's um, probably a cry for help, right? If you've got a lot of people leaving on a regular basis. So having the employee engagement metric, if you've got a way of measuring your employees' engagement levels, that can be your determiner of how well things are going. A recommendation for that, for doing employee engagement as a function, here is kind of on my last slides, is to measure it, right? So to measure it, we recommend the Gallup's Q12 tool, but there are lots of employee engagement tools that you can use. Some are paid, some are free. You just kind of set up your own structure internally to track it. But being able to consistently measure um, your employees' engagement levels gives you an idea of whether or not your efforts are working. So a few takeaways from today's information. One, engagement and recognition reduce turnover. Okay, that's in the numbers. Gallup sees it over and over again. How well we execute on those things is how well it's going to affect our turnover, you know, how relevant and impactful our efforts are to the people that we're trying to work with. You know, it's not a one size fits all. That's why we don't have just, hey, just apply this practice and it's going to cure your retention. That's not how it works. Everything is pretty specific to the culture of the organization. Um, and I don't have it in this deck, probably because at this point it's cliche. But when people are leaving, they're not leaving the overall organization, they're leaving their manager, they're leaving the culture, right? So there's something that folks don't find acceptable in the way things are done that matches up with them individually, that gives them reason to leave, right, on their own. So in these engagement pieces, what we're doing is ensuring that the folks that are working with this have talents that are aligned with the work that needs to be done, right? And sometimes that needs to be right-sized, but more often than not, we want to do our best to hang on to folks that know our business and our work and our people. We want to develop opportunities to retain top talent, so always be thinking about that and being creative about that. And then flexible, supportive environments improve satisfaction. So that's another area of innovation. You know, however we can be flexible, we find is valuable, right, to staff. Okay, so next steps. First thing is assess the current metrics. So if you do not have any way of measuring your employee engagement right now, please consider how you might measure that, right? Find a way that at least on an annual basis that you can get a check in on the staff's engagement levels in a way that they feel as free as possible to provide their most honest feedback. Okay. So that's the first thing. Second is to implement prioritized strategies. So as you're thinking about what you can do to retain employees, that you prioritize those techniques and try not to bite off too much at a time, so you know what's working. And then the last thing is to monitor progress and adapt. So it's almost impossible to monitor the progress if you don't get that initial metric. So consider that if you want to take an evidence-based approach, data-based approach to improving employee retention and improving employee engagement. Part of that is finding simple ways of measuring your progress. All right, and that way you can adapt things as you move along. Okay. Cool. All right. So those are my official comments. And I'd love to open up the balance of the time that we have here for questions that you may have about employee retention. Or if you've got ideas on retention programs or other items that that are related here, we can do a little Q&A.
Yeah, Lawrence, I'm curious about some of the tools or tactics for tracking employee engagement and like how to quantify that.
Oh, well, the Gallup tool that I'm qualified to run is called the Gallup Q12, and there's a great book that describes the Q12 and all of the research behind it. I'm gonna put the title of it in the chat here. And it is called First Break All the Rules. that one is a pretty interesting read, right? And it kind of walks you through what Gallup's process was on conducting employee engagement surveys, the questions to include, and the questions that were irrelevant to retention, right? So there were a lot of like employee satisfaction type questions that were so ubiquitous that they weren't helpful, right? So like for instance, um, like uh, like do you feel you're getting paid fairly? Well, I don't think anybody feels like they're getting paid fairly. I mean, maybe some do, right? But everybody's looking for a little better paycheck. So that's like across the board. Everybody's got the same sort of emotion behind that. What they found was things that were more related to your purpose at work and your own development as an individual part of that organization was more important. So things like, do you know what's expected of you on the job? That's the number one question, as a matter of fact. That's the first question that we ask in the Q12, Q1 is do you know what's expected of you on the job? Right. Number two is, do you have the tools to do your job? Okay. So things like that wound up being far more important in terms of engagement metrics. And this was through Gallup's study. So they narrowed down 12 questions. It conveniently fits into 12 months. So if you wanted to focus on a piece of engagement company wide, you could do that on a schedule. But it also gives managers very targeted things that they can do. So if maybe it's only a couple of areas out of those 12 that really need improvement, that managers can focus in on those areas and start there and then kind of work backwards from there, or find another strategy where one may affect another. One question, response to a question may reflect another's response to a question. I may not know what tools I need if I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to be doing, right? So things like that can line up.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No worries. This is a really good question.
Lawrence, if a coworker were to have said like I'm feeling micromanaged, how would you take a step back from that?
From feeling micromanaged.
Yeah, because I mean like I've been micromanaged and I just never want to be that to somebody else. So like just like to avoid any type of because I know that's why people leave. That's why people will decide to leave. Again, you talked about the management. So I just think I would hate for somebody to feel that and then choose to leave the company because of that.
Yeah, it's tricky. That's a very good question, Antonia, because one of the things that you can do to help in that is to speak in terms of the results or the final product rather than how you get there.
Mm,
Um, the how you get there is that world, that realm of creativity. So,
yeah.
it's fine to have those discussions when when we get stuck, or if there's a required process or something like
Mm,
that. But the more flexibility you give for creativity, the more folks can kind of demonstrate their own um, kind of personality and what they
okay.
bring to the organization. It gives an opportunity to like help shape that. I heard a very interesting term not too long ago. This is around hiring. It's kind of related. Um, but when looking for new folks to join the team, in the past, you'll hear people talk about culture fit, like they want somebody that will fit in with the rest of the culture at the organization. And the term that they use instead is culture add. So like we're not a defined set in stone culture. When we bring people on, we recognize that we're bringing a person on, and that person is going to bring with them something that's going to infuse into the culture. So when we're looking at, hiring, we look at like what they're going to add to our culture. When we're looking internally already, we can take a similar kind of an approach, and what do people bring to the goals that we have, right? The objectives that we have.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Right. Maria, any thoughts?
No, but I do value all the information. Thankfully, our department has been full since I started in the position. So I think we've only had to list one position. But I guess in so okay, maybe you can answer this question.
Okay.
I get a lot of so our work is very demanding. We have one person for each geographic location. So it's a one person office for a large location. And so it's hard for them to manage, you know, all the calls coming in and all the kiosk applications coming in, voicemails, emails, text messages. So, you know, we get a lot of complaints, basically, more in one general area, and she's newer to our agency. So, you know, I have tried where I've paired her up with a one of our other case coordinators that's doing, you know, the same work to try and help, you know, give her some pointers and ideas. So I don't know, maybe just some resources on help with, you know, bringing that new person up to speed.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it sounds like they've had some time to shadow the work and kind of like maybe a little bit of informal training. How does that look?
Yeah, formal training, you know, in the beginning for a couple weeks or so, and then I think it was another couple weeks to a month for the shadowing.
Mhm.
And so it's still, you know, I don't know when I talk to her or she sounds, you know, like she can manage everything, but then, you know, I get several calls from clients and then different departments saying that they haven't heard from her and they've left several messages. And so it's just frustrating because, you know, when I talk to her, it seems like she can manage it, but that's not what's actually happening, I guess.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah,
hard
go
to
ahead.
decipher what's really going on.
Ah. So remember that Q1 was
Hmm.
knowing what's expected of me, right?
Right.
So, and that for whatever reason, like it can sometimes be one of the more difficult questions to answer until it's set, right? And that I say that is difficult because the other person really needs to understand too, you know. So it sounds like in this case, you've got somebody who is aware of the job and does not necessarily meet the expectations of the organization. Is that fair?
Hmm.
Okay. So, how is it that you communicate those expectations today?
Um, so what I have come up with lately is to do like weekly check-ins. Um, and she I've allotted time in the morning and in the afternoon on her calendar. So I went in since she shares her calendar. with me, I went in and actually allotted time for her to do those specific tasks, so that she can to help her get caught up.
And does she participate in that, or do you do that and assign it to her, or how's that look?
So it's on her calendar. We met, it was probably in October, I believe, of last year, and we both came up with this idea. So and then I just touch base with her on a weekly basis to see how it's going. And but I feel she's younger. She's
Okay.
and so I feel, to me, what I've seen, because I've also she's in an office by herself. So I am not there to watch or see her daily tasks. I'm trusting that she's getting the job done. But a couple times that I have been there, I've noticed distractions. So like maybe being on her personal phone too much, or she does have a couple of young kids, so I understand she needs to have she needs to be accessible in case they call from the school or babysitter or something.
I see. Yeah.
But
So, yeah, and you don't want to be in the business of managing her time, right? You have
right,
your own thing to do, right? Yeah.
right,
And then what you do need is to have certain things taken care of, right?
correct.
Right. So the more clearly she understands what those things that need to be taken care of are and when they need to be taken care of, by when.
Mm-hmm.
And that she has a very clear understanding of what good looks like, meaning, working through these processes in this amount of time, getting this number of tasks or what have you completed is a reasonable, kind of an expectation.
Right.
If she understands those expectations, in some ways that frees you of having to care at all, whether or not she's, managing other aspects of her life at the same time as work. If in fact those things are done, right? So, like go nuts, go watch TikTok, half the day if you need to. If the tasks are all getting done, that's what you need for your work-life balance. Right? So,
Right.
you get to take off your own preferences on how things get done. The challenge then is, are those things getting done, right? So like it sounds like they're not necessarily, or the conversations after that are like, well, how are we going to make that happen? The more you can have your staff person give you the plan,
Mm-hmm.
the more likely it is that they will engage in that plan, right? If we as managers assign a plan, it's kind of hit and miss. It kind of really depends on the other person and how they receive that. Okay. But it's always important to have that in our back pocket. So here's how that can look at in practice is I say, hey, staffer, what's your plan to meet these objectives? Right. And then that person has an opportunity to give it back to me. If it's not realistic, or how, they can't really manage it, or they get stuck, that's their opportunity to, hey, would you like some suggestions? And then here, like, let's map this out. But again, like the more you can have them commit to their own, this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to meet your expectations,
Mm-hmm.
the more likely it is that that'll get done. And you're kind of just holding somebody to their own word, uh,
Right.
kind of a don't fail yourself message,
Right.
don't fail me, right? So in some cases that can help. Is that helpful? Or
It
yeah.
is.
Okay. I do the same thing with my kids, by the way. That's like a like a transferable skill, I guess.
And Lawrence, may I throw in Monday.com is an awesome tool. That's what Wildfire's kind of going towards. So Chris is able to put certain tasks and assign them to certain people. And then, so let's say he assigns me a task, I'm able to go in there and make a note like, oh, okay, this is what I did, and this is a due, he give due dates and such. I really enjoy that because it avoids an email, it avoids a conversation that maybe is like kind of like going around in circles.
Mhm.
So that's also an option too. And you know, honestly, maybe there's just something going on in her personal life that she's just scared to say or something. Maybe she really just isn't getting it. I'm not sure, but it's hard. That was a hard one to listen to. I'm like, dang it,
Yeah.
what could you do?
And, you know, like you said, I don't want to micromanage, you know what I mean? I want to be able to be flexible. But again, I still need this work to get done. Like
For sure, for
these
sure.
clients need assistance. So I need you to call them and schedule appointments. And so, yeah.
Yep. The more clear you can be with with your expectations, also the better, right? Like yes, I expect you to get in touch with the client, but I expect you to get in touch with the client within so many days or
Mhm.
within this time frame. You know, like just that little extra is enough for them to know on their own whether or
Yeah.
not they're meeting your expectation, you know.
Yeah, we do have, an expectation of 48 hours, but it seems like right now is our busy time, so we've extended that a little um, because they are getting inundated with people contacting them and needing assistance. So,
So when you say 48 hours is their turnaround time, like within 48 hours they're going to respond?
yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, the more clear it is, the easier it is to manage to it. I tell you what, it's like everybody follows the same rule. You know,
Right.
that becomes very, very easy. And to get a commitment to it. If you get, part of it may be, you know, knowing on your end that that other person understands, like that you're satisfied that they understand the commitment level, you know.
Right.
And then if they're not able to meet that commitment, that they feel vulnerable enough to come to you and say, "Hey, Maria, I'm not going to be able to meet this commitment. You know, what can we do?" So in some way, being able to demonstrate that you're open and as early as possible to know if things aren't going the way that we had hoped, right? And that we can course correct or
Mhm.
find a solution or, you know,
Yeah,
help people through it.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And at the end of the day, you do all that stuff, chances are if you've set the expectations and they're not going to meet them, they'll walk themselves out of the business. Now, we're talking about retention here, so it's kind of quirky that I would say like, oh yeah, it'll just take care of itself. But what I will say is, you know, like the more clear we are about our expectations and then how it is, you know, that's one hand is clear the expectations. The other is how we as an organization support you as the worker to get all that done, right? So like here's all the tools at your disposal, which are, you know, software and people and resources and all sorts of stuff, right? It's not just one thing. So that they feel equipped, and that's part of that development process too, right? So that's maybe part of the solution of the conversations that you have to get things better. So identifying what the development processes are.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Nice. Thank you for letting us know the challenge.
That that thankfully is only the only challenge we have. So
Oh, knock on wood. Here we go.
yes.
Very good. Okay. All right. We've got just a couple minutes left. I dropped the survey link for this call in the chat. It's the same as the QR code on the screen there. Might have time for one more question. And then right after this, if you're part of the HR group, our HR group meeting's coming. Okay, real good. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We'll send out the recording and copy of the deck to all the folks that registered. And we look forward to seeing y'all in the next one.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.